It all started on a quiet evening. My name is Sarah, and at the time, I had just turned 30. I had been married to Joey for a little over a year, and things were going well, or so I thought. Joey was everything I had ever wanted in a husband. He was kind, thoughtful, and loved me deeply, or at least that's what I believed in the early days of our marriage. We had always talked about starting a family, building a future together. I could picture our life so clearly, filled with love, support, and the kind of bond I had always dreamed of. When Joey proposed, I remember being overwhelmed with joy. I felt like I was stepping into the perfect life I had always imagined. But looking back, I realized that those early days were simply the calm before the storm. The first sign of trouble came out of nowhere. 3 months into our marriage, I received a call from Grace, Joey's mother. She asked if we could come over to visit. It seemed like a simple request, and since Joey had encouraged me to be a stay-at-home wife, I had plenty of time on my hands. I figured it was a chance to bond with my in-laws, so I agreed without hesitation. But something felt different as soon as I arrived at their family home. Grace was waiting at the door, her usual warm smile replaced with a cold, distant expression. "Hi, Grace," I greeted her, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. Without a word, she gestured for me to come inside. "There are some things I need you to do," she said, her tone flat and emotionless. This wasn't the Grace I knew. She had always been kind and welcoming to me in the past, but now there was something sharp in her voice that set me on edge. I followed her into the living room, where she pointed towards the kitchen. "The sink's full of dishes from breakfast and lunch. Go wash them." Her words hit me like a slap. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what was happening. Grace had never spoken to me like this before. I had been to their home many times, but I was always treated as a guest, never as someone expected to do household chores. When I didn't move fast enough, Grace's eyes narrowed. "What are you standing there for?" she snapped. "Go wash the dishes." Shaken by her sudden hostility, I nodded and made my way to the kitchen. My heart was pounding in my chest as I stood in front of the sink, staring at the pile of dirty dishes. I had no idea why Grace was acting this way. In the past, she had been so cheerful, so full of life whenever Joey and I visited. But now, it was as if a switch had flipped, and I didn't know why. I quickly washed the dishes, trying to keep my head down and avoid upsetting her any further. But my mind was racing. Was I imagining this? Was Grace really treating me this way, or was it all in my head? No matter how hard I tried to shake the feeling, I couldn't ignore the unease creeping up my spine. When I finished with the dishes, I hesitated for a moment before telling Grace I was done. I half expected her to thank me, maybe even apologize for being so harsh. But instead, she just waved me off. "Good. Now do the laundry, and make sure you clean all the way up to the stairs." Once again, I was left speechless. I had never been asked to do housework at their home before, let alone ordered around like this. But what choice did I have? I couldn't just refuse, especially when Grace's mood seemed so unpredictable. So I made my way to the laundry room, feeling a deep sense of dread settle in my chest. I wasn't sure where they kept the cleaning supplies or how they did their laundry, but I figured it out as best I could. Every time I glanced in Grace's direction, she was watching me, her expression unreadable. I tried to do everything as perfectly as possible, hoping to avoid her wrath. But no matter what I did, it seemed like it wasn't enough. "That's not how Lily does it," Grace muttered as I struggled to fold the laundry the way she liked. If it were Lily, she would have done it right the first time. Her words stung. Lily, Joey's younger sister, had always been the golden child in Grace's eyes. She was perfect. At least, that's how Grace always made her out to be. I had met Lily a few times before, and while she seemed nice enough, I couldn't help but feel like I was constantly being compared to her. I tried to push through the rest of the day, doing my best to keep up with Grace's demands. But by the time I left their home that evening, I felt drained, both physically and emotionally. I wasn't sure how to handle this sudden shift in Grace's behavior, and the worst part was, I didn't know if Joey would believe me if I told him. When I got home, I decided to bring it up. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I went to your parents' house today, and Grace, well, she wasn't herself. She kept comparing me to Lily and ordering me around. Joey looked at me with a frown. That doesn't sound like Mom, he said, sounding skeptical. Are you sure you're not overreacting? His response made my heart sink. I had hoped he would take my side, that he would understand how difficult the day had been for me. But instead, he brushed it off as if it were nothing. I felt a pang of frustration, but I didn't want to push the issue. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just a one-time thing. But as the weeks went by, Grace's behavior only worsened. She called me more frequently, always with some excuse to have me come over and help with chores. Every visit was the same. She would order me around, criticize everything I did, and constantly compare me to Lily. It didn't matter how hard I tried to please her. In Grace's eyes, I would never be good enough. I brought it up with Joey again, hoping he would finally understand. Grace is getting worse, I said one evening after another exhausting visit. She's constantly calling me over and treating me like her personal maid. I can't keep doing this. Joey sighed, clearly annoyed. Maybe you're just being too sensitive, he said. Mom's probably just trying to help you learn how to manage a household. Why not take it a little more seriously? His words hit me like a punch to the gut. How could he not see what was happening? I wasn't being sensitive. Grace was harassing me, and Joey was turning a blind eye. A cold emptiness settled over me as I realized that I couldn't rely on him to help me. After that, things only got worse. Grace's demands became more frequent, and Joey's indifference became more pronounced. It was as if I had been completely cut off from the life I had envisioned. I no longer felt like Joey's wife. I felt like his family's servant. Fast forward to 1.5 years into our marriage. By this time, I was pregnant, and I had just entered my 3rd trimester. Physically, I was struggling. The weight of the pregnancy was starting to take its toll, and I was constantly exhausted. But despite this, Grace continued to call me over to her house, expecting me to do chores just like before. One day, Grace called on Joey's day off, and as usual, we were both expected to go. I didn't want to, but Joey insisted. I was already dreading it, knowing that Grace would have no sympathy for my condition. And I was right. The moment we arrived, Grace started barking orders. Sarah, the floors need to be scrubbed, and don't forget to dust the shelves. Oh, and the laundry's piling up. I tried to explain that I wasn't feeling well, that the pregnancy was making it hard for me to stay on my feet for long periods, but Grace wasn't having it. Lily did housework even when she was pregnant, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. You're just being lazy. Her words cut deep, but I didn't have the strength to argue. I got to work, pushing through the pain and discomfort as best I could. But as the hours went by, I started to feel worse. My back ached, my feet were swollen, and my stomach felt tight with cramps. I could feel the cold sweat on my forehead as I tried to ignore the pain, hoping it would go away. But then, as I was standing in the kitchen, preparing dinner for everyone, a sharp, unbearable pain suddenly shot through my stomach. I gasped and doubled over, clutching the counter for support. I felt like I was going to collapse. At that moment, the front door swung open, and I heard a familiar voice call out from the living room. We're home! It was Lily. I could hear her chatting with Joey and William as they made their way into the house, but I couldn't focus on their words. All I could think about was the pain radiating through my body. I tried to straighten up, but my legs felt weak, and I could barely stand. Lily entered the kitchen, her cheerful expression fading the moment she saw me hunched over in pain. Sarah, what's wrong? Are you okay? I shook my head, unable to speak. My stomach felt like it was on fire, and I could feel tears welling up in my eyes. Lily's eyes widened as she looked at me. Wait, are you pregnant? I nodded weakly. I'm 8 months along, I managed to say through the pain. Lily's face turned red with anger. Joey didn't tell me, she said, her voice trembling with fury. Without another word, she stormed out of the kitchen, her footsteps loud as she marched towards the living room. Mom, Lily yelled, her voice echoing through the house. Why is Sarah doing all the work when she's pregnant? Grace appeared at the top of the stairs looking confused. What are you talking about? she asked, her tone defensive. Lily glared at her. Sarah's in the kitchen, barely able to stand, and you've been making her do all the chores? You've been pregnant before. You know how hard this is. Grace's face paled. Well, Sarah insisted on doing it, she stammered, clearly caught off guard by Lily's sudden outburst. That's a lie, Lily shouted. You've been treating her like a servant, and I'm not going to stand by and let it happen anymore. Without waiting for a response, Lily stormed into the living room. Зрение, где Джой и Уильям сидели, не замечая хаос, разворачивающийся вокруг них. She grabbed a newspaper from the coffee table and smacked Joey on the head. What's wrong with you? She yelled. Your wife is 8 months pregnant and you're just sitting here while she does all the work? Joey looked stunned, his eyes wide with confusion. I didn't know, he stammered. Didn't know? Lily repeated, her voice rising. Are you that clueless? Sarah's being mistreated by Mom and you've done nothing to stop it. William, who had been silently watching the scene, tried to intervene. Lily, calm down, he said, his voice quiet but firm. But Lily wasn't having it. Don't tell me to calm down, Dad, she shouted. When I got married, you told my husband to take care of me, to prioritize my well-being. What about Joey? He's letting Sarah suffer while he sits here playing games on his phone. It's shameful. The room fell silent as Lily's words hung in the air. Joey and William both looked down, their faces pale, unable to respond. Finally, Lily turned to all three of them, her voice cold and steady. You should all be ashamed of yourselves, she said. Get out of the house. Now. Grace, Joey, and William stared at her in disbelief, but Lily didn't back down. I said, get out, she repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. Without another word, the three of them shuffled out of the house, leaving Lily and me alone in the kitchen. The tension in the room slowly began to fade as the front door clicked shut behind them. Lily turned to me, her tough exterior melting away. Are you okay, Sarah? She asked, her voice soft and full of concern. Did I scare the baby? I couldn't help but laugh, despite the pain and exhaustion that weighed me down. No, the baby's fine, I said, wiping away the tears that had started to fall. Thank you, Lily. I don't know what I would have done without you. Lily smiled, her eyes warm with sympathy. You don't have to thank me, she said. I'm just sorry I didn't realize what was going on sooner. I had no idea Mom was treating you like this. From that day forward, everything changed. Joey came home later that night, full of apologies. Sarah, I'm so sorry, he said, his voice heavy with guilt. I'll never let this happen again. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. Grace and William visited our home a few days later, offering a formal apology for their behavior. We were wrong, Grace said, her voice trembling with regret. We're so sorry. After that, there were no more calls from Grace asking me to come over, no more demands for me to do housework. Joey stopped suggesting we visit his family, and I finally felt at peace as I prepared for the birth of our child. Lily and I grew closer in the months that followed. We talked often, and I found myself looking forward to our conversations. It was a relief to have someone in Joey's family who truly understood and supported me. When I told her I was considering visiting Joey's family after the baby was born, she smiled and said, "Let me know when you're going. We'll plan a family visit together." For the first time in a long time, I felt like things were going to be okay. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but with Lily by my side, I felt stronger. And if Lily ever needed me, I knew I would be there for her, just like she had been there for me. Everything had changed, but for the first time, I was